All right, thanks to Joe Biden's weak leadership, America's enemies no longer fear us and our allies no longer respect us. And it is more evident no matter where you look around the world. Now, the leader of our oldest ally, France, they're now suggesting, Macron is suggesting that Europe put some distance between itself and the U.S. So apparently they are ready to fight their own battles now. Good. We won't have to worry about Europe, the continent. They can handle. Macron can handle what's going on in Ukraine. And by the way, Egypt, another supposed friend who we send billions of dollars every year to. Now they, according to reports, they want to send missiles to Russia, our adversary, to destroy the equipment that we have spent and sent to Ukraine. Oh, and by the way, the only reason we know that, because all about Egypt, is because of that massive leak of highly classified intelligence that Biden seems so unconcerned about and has been unwilling to show us. And by the way, not that there's ever been any good handling of classified information. Remember, Joe is facing his own, quote, document scandal. Congress is now finally going to get a look at just how much damage his carelessness may have done. But none of that can compare to the damage he's allowed China to inflict on the entire world. The Chinese are now actively rewriting the entire world order right in front of all of us, right under Joe's nose, taking full advantage of his total lack of any and all influence on the world stage and threatening any country, especially the U.S., that dares to support Taiwan's right to independence. They bought American farmland, ranch land. They have bought it near several of our key military bases. They flew that spy balloon all across the entire country. They were, in fact, collecting sensitive intelligence and sending it to China in real time. They let the world know that they're ready for war with us on land, sea, and by air. And by the way, now they are signaling that Taiwan is next, and invasion is clearly imminent, and they're daring America to stop it. And as usual, Joe Biden is doing nothing in spite of all these threats. Here now with more, Florida Senator Marco Rubio is with us. Senator, good to see you. All right, I'm glad the Gang of Eight, as you call it, are getting the classified information. That's going to be very important. Here's my biggest concern, and you know a lot more about this than I do. So when President Trump was in office, we had an alliance, one that I never thought I'd see in our lifetime. The U.S., Israel, the Jordanians, the Egyptians, the Saudis, the Emirates. I didn't think I'd see that in our lifetime, but we had it, all against Iranian hegemony and a nuclear-armed Iran. That has now deteriorated, and I believe because the world has watched and witnessed a cognitive mess as a U.S. president. And, for example, Saudi Arabia has now aligned itself with China. China brokered a deal between the Saudis and the Iranians, is now brokering a deal between the Saudis and the Syrians. Now we have Egypt, where we send money to. They're going to be sending weaponry and help to Russia to aid in their battle against Ukraine. They were supposed to be our ally. They get billions of our dollars. My question is this. Now, from my perspective, I believe we are witnessing a new axis of evil emerge. Am I wrong, number one? And number two, am I wrong in thinking Joe Biden is incapable of dealing with it?
So, I mean, Sean, you just outlined a lot of what I was going to say. Look, we have a world that realizes we have a president that can barely put together complete sentences, appears incoherent, oftentimes doesn't even know where he is in many cases in some of these places, that allowed spy balloons to be flown over our head, that abandoned billions of dollars of American military equipment left over into the hands of the Taliban, and spends all day talking about electric vehicles and solar panels that he knows we're going to have to buy from China. We have a justice system that indicts political opponents and former presidents and leading presidential candidates, a justice system that infiltrates sources and tries to spy on Catholic churches, but allows criminals to destroy San Francisco and Baltimore and Detroit and Washington, D.C. and Los Angeles and Manhattan, you name it. We have a military that doesn't spend its time talking about new weapon systems or how to care for veterans that are committing suicides at historic rates. They spend their time talking about transgender issues and all kinds of racial disparity stuff, not defending our country. We have a media that's become a joke. A media that's wasted 2.5 years of our time on a Russia collusion situation. Then they moved on from that to cover up the Hunter Biden situation. That's now a full-blown investigation. Our universities are a forum for crazy things to happen. You can't even speak on a university campus. People being assaulted by men wearing dresses and these violent protests and shutting down speech. And our culture, what we focused on as a culture? We're focused on the fact that now some man pretending to be a woman gets paid millions of dollars to sell Nike sports bras and Bud Light. So the world looks at that and said, this place is a laughingstock, and they react to it. And I could go on for an hour about all the things that we are being embarrassed on the world stage. Our adversaries are taking advantage of it, and our friends are saying, hey, we may have to go on our own here because these guys look like they're about to commit societal suicide.
Let me ask you, I'll read you some headlines, if I may, Senator. China warns that its carrier killer missiles will wipe out any U.S. naval force sent to defend Taiwan. One, leaked intelligence shows China's hypersonic missile can penetrate U.S. air defenses. 3, Trump's EPA chief is warning that Biden is selling out U.S. energy policy and security to China. 4, China declares that its military is now capable of smashing Taiwan, and they're even going as far as to showing their battle plans on state-run television of exactly the targets that they plan to take out with Taiwan, and they're warning every country and directly threatening the United States that if we dare lift a finger to help our ally in the region, that they will target us and they will destroy us. How do you interpret that?
Yeah. Well, I interpret it two ways. Number one is, look, there's a capability gap that we have to close. We haven't invested in the things we need to because we've been focused on the Middle East. We've been focused on other parts of the world. There are things we're going to need to do to create deterrence against China and those systems that they're building. But one thing is ability, and the other thing is the willingness. And I want to be honest here, okay? I don't care if you're a left-wing Democrat. I don't care if you voted for Democrats. Ask yourself this honestly. Do we truly believe that the Chinese Communist Party and Xi Jinping is intimidated by Joe Biden and this administration, are worried about them? Do we really think that, guys? I mean, I think people need to be honest about that. This is not a president or an administration that commands respect, much less fear or concern on the part of our adversaries. That's why it's no mistake that the Taliban moved in the way they did and gave us 72 hours to leave before they slaughtered us, and in Afghanistan threatened to slaughter us. It's no coincidence that Putin moves on Ukraine, and it's no coincidence that China's ramping all this up right now. This administration looks like an incompetent band of fools, and it is embarrassing us in the eyes of the world, and it is encouraging our adversaries, and it is causing our allies or former allies or friends to say, guys, we can't count on these people anymore. They've gone nuts over there. They're destroying their own country. We better look out for ourselves. It's just real world, real talk.
You said something really profound. They can't count on us anymore. I would make the argument, and tell me if you think I'm wrong, that the Saudis, they made a calculation, and the calculation is that China is going to overtake the U.S. as the leader, the sole leader of the world, that America has abdicated its role in the free world and their place of leadership worldwide. So I think they made a decision. They want to be on the winning side, so they're now aligning with China. I think Egypt now has made the same choice as, you know, as I mentioned earlier, their actions with Russia, in respect to Russia. So my question is, are they making a conscious choice that they think the winner of this, quote, new Cold War, that this new axis of evil, as I'm calling it, Iran, Russia, and China, that they're going to be the victors here? Is that their determination?
I think the Saudis have said this. The Saudis' mortal enemy are the Shia in Iran, and what the United States, and here's the United States trying to cut a deal with Iran on nuclear weapons, despite the fact that Iran is trying to kill former Trump officials. And so what Saudi Arabia is saying is, if you're going to cut a deal with them, we're going to cut a deal before you cut a deal, and we're going to spread our risk. So what Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and countries all over the world are doing now is they're distributing risk. They want to deposit a little bit of goodwill in every bucket to see how things turn out. They are basically hedging their bets because they, at least as long as Joe Biden is in the White House, they don't know what to expect. But they turn on the news and they watch it and they read our newspapers, and all they read is craziness from what happens to our culture, what's happening in our society, our universities, our justice system, the administration, our military, you name it. There is no part of our country anymore that has not been turned into a laughingstock in the eyes of the world. The catalyst to this is the radical left that finds a home in this White House and the people that it's put in office, which embarrass us every day.
I believe this new axis of evil, and I think the choice of other nations that they're going to bet on China and their new alliance and their position of leadership, I think that they believe if there's any conflict, that China is the more likely to come out the victor. Do you agree with that? Do you think America has the military might, if necessary? Nobody would ever want this to happen, to get into a military conflict with China. If that did happen, would we lose? Do we have the hypersonic missiles they're bragging about every day? Do we have the capability to stop their hypersonic missiles?
Well, I think we still have very significant capabilities, but that doesn't mean the Chinese won't go anyways. That's how important Taiwan is to them. But again, none of your capabilities matter in the eyes of the Chinese if they don't think you have the willingness to do it. And look, if the United States wouldn't even tell the Taliban, look, we were planning to leave anyway, but you're going to give us a month because we have people and things that we got to get out of this country, and instead agreed to a 72-hour ridiculous time frame that they gave us to leave and left all that equipment behind, if we couldn't even handle the Taliban, a bunch of guys running around, you know, wearing whatever it is they wear, these robes or whatever, you think the Chinese are worried about Biden coming after them? In a conflict like this? They question our willingness. They think our culture and our society is broken and weak, and they think the guy in the White House, and rightfully so, doesn't have the willingness to do any of the tough things because he's too focused on promoting some radical agenda domestically and talking about outdated things around the world when they even make sense.
All right, straight up question. If, in fact, and I believe that it will happen sooner than later, China goes and tries to take Taiwan, and I believe they will be successful. Do you believe that the U.S., that Joe Biden, will lift a finger to help them? Because I don't believe he will.
I think the answer to your question depends on who the president is. Do I believe this administration,
if it's
given
Joe
what they
Biden,
are focused on a daily basis? No, I don't think that they would. I hope I'm wrong, but I don't think that they will. I don't think that they will because I think ultimately they'll be caught by surprise. They'll be limited in their responses by a bunch of different things, including in their own party. And at the end, it won't matter because they won't be prepared to do it. They'll try everything possible. And by the way, the leverage that they've given the Chinese over us is more than just military. When you're saying that you're going to build our entire energy grid on things that we depend on the Chinese for, how are you going to possibly go to war with them if they cut you off? We don't have oil. We don't have gas anymore because you can't produce it under Joe Biden. We're going to have batteries and solar panels made in China. That's all the leverage they need to ensure that we don't get involved.
Security-wise, from your perspective, is this the most dangerous time since the end of World War II and the end of the Cold War?
Without a doubt. Not only the most dangerous, the most important. The 21st century is being defined right now, and unfortunately the people in charge of American foreign policy, and domestic policy for that matter, are turning our country into a laughingstock.
All right, Marco Rubio, sadly I agree with that assessment. I think you're dead on right.